Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. The coronavirus pandemic is, along with climate change, an inescapably global challenge, right? I mean, we've already seen in the months of this how little the virus cares about things like borders, how it's altered daily life around the globe, developed and developing countries alike, the global south, the global north. Any solution to the virus, to problems caused by the virus, will also have to be global. Vaccination, treatment, best practices, all of that. Yet today we learned President Donald Trump declined an invitation to address the World Health Organization, while China's President Xi Jinping accepted, joining other world leaders like Germany's Angela Merkel and France's Emmanuel Macron. I mean, every world leader is facing some variation of the same challenge. And there's probably a lot to learn from the exchange between countries, particularly from countries like Germany, to name just one example, that has successfully contained the virus and minimized fatalities. But here's the thing. The president refuses the counsel and advice of his own government, never mind other ones. Back on April 16th, the Trump administration released guidelines produced by the CDC to reopen the economy in 3 phases. We keep going back to this document because it's the most orphaned document in America. The president unveiled it. They posted them on the White House website. They're still there. You can go read them. And they're sensible. But President Trump got so impatient and could not wait for states to meet his own guidelines, the one that he introduced from his CDC. He started beating up on governors and berating them and urging states to ignore them the very first day, tweeting about liberating this state and that. And so on April 20th, Georgia Governor Brian Kemp announced he was opening up the state, starting with essential services, which also happened to include massage studios and bowling alleys. Governor Kemp was out front. He kind of branded himself as a first reopener, not abiding by the CDC guidelines. But things have not gone great for him. I mean, they haven't been catastrophic either, so we should explain. First, Kemp got hung out to dry because he thought he was listening to the president by opening early, right? The president's tweeting, "Liberate Michigan, liberate Virginia," and Brian Kemp's like, "I'm with you, MAGA, MAGA." And then the president cuts him off the knees a few days later saying he disagreed with Kemp's decision. Since then, Georgia appears to be, cooking the books to show the data was better than it really is, or at least making a bunch of errors that have that cumulative effect. Here's the chart they released, okay? Now look at how the new confirmed cases appear to go down on a nice smooth slope, right? You look at that chart, you think, okay, getting better. But then when you look closely, you realize the dates are not in the right order. Here's May 7th, right before April 26th. That's not the way that chart should work. That type of screw up that has been an error in that direction has happened at least 3 times. And the governor's office says they were not trying to be misleading, but I don't know. Now, maybe as a result of these over-optimistic messages, some Georgians seem to be embracing the reopening and sort of thinking that the risk isn't there anymore. It's gone, basically. The Washington Post has a great piece about people shopping at a mall in suburban Atlanta. Quote, outside Urban Outfitters, Jennifer Kiernan was having a glass of wine as her daughter shopped inside. "Oh my God, this feels great. I love it," she said, explaining that she assumed that she and everyone around her was healthy. "I think people would not be out if they had been exposed to anyone with corona." Now, I am sympathetic to the feeling of greatness. I am sympathetic to the temptation of just like having a normal day and having a glass of wine at a place. That does sound awesome. But there's no relationship between how good that feels and what the risk is. And it's not this individual's job to assess the risk. That's the government's job. Now, there are other states like Georgia that have been quick to reopen their state, again, at the kind of president's behest, even if his own guidelines say not to. Starting today, Florida Governor Ron DeSantis allowed restaurants and retail stores and gyms to reach 50% capacity, which, again, not, fully back, but they're starting to open. That's even as Palm Beach County is identified as a coronavirus hotspot in a Homeland Security document. And then there's Texas Governor Greg Abbott, who announced today that daycares can open immediately, which, again, that's a vital thing for getting people back to work. But it happens just days after the state reported a record number of coronavirus deaths in one day. So here's where things kind of stand right now as we look to this, as we think about our own future, all of us across the country and across the world. We do know some very clear things about the virus at this point, right? If you change absolutely nothing in your society and your behavior and the way things happen, you just continue life as usual, the virus will ravage you and it will run rampant. We know that. We saw this. We saw it in outbreaks around the world. We have been seeing it here in meatpacking plants across the country. We've seen it in veterans' homes and nursing homes, right? That much we do know. What we legitimately just don't really know, though, is what happens now with the virus? Like, what does it do with some modified version of normal? And the big question is, with modified physical distancing and mask wearing and some policies in place, that can we keep the virus suppressed even if we do not implement some kind of aggressive program of testing and tracing and contact tracing and quarantine and all that stuff? Most virologists I have talked to, and I've talked to a number of them, most public health officials, think no, probably not, that we're going to see the virus come back. We'll see outbreaks in places. What's unnerving about Georgia, Texas, and Florida, and man, that does look appealing, I have to say, like normal life in the sunshine in spring, is that they are taking on a very high level of risk with a very uncertain future. And here's the other thing. It may work out. I mean, we honestly don't know. I literally hope it does. But if there are two things that we have learned in this era, two lessons we cannot unlearn or forget. One, you can elevate the risk of highly unlikely events, highly unlikely catastrophes, tail risks, and you can get away with it for a while until you don't. All these actions to reopen aggressively, right, in violation often of what the CDC says, they're high risk. But not only are Republicans in the White House and in state capitals ignoring the CDC guidelines, they're even openly going out and attacking the CDC. Here's White House Trade Advisor Peter Navarro yesterday on Meet the Press.
Early on in this crisis, the CDC, which really had the most trusted brand around the world in this space, really let the country down with the testing, because not only did they keep the testing within the bureaucracy, they had a bad test, and that did set us back.
That is a fascinating clip because he is correct. The CDC screwed up enormously. Donald Trump's CDC, the Trump it's not some foreign satellite that landed and took over the response. It's in the Trump administration. We do not know exactly what the new normal looks like, but then there is a chance of something bad happening. Say it's 1 in 100, and you increase it to 1 in 10. That's really dangerous, but there's still a likelihood you can avoid a 1 in 10 chance. And that's basically the risk of society-wide collapse during the Trump era, from the day that he was inaugurated, right? We have managed to get by almost 4 years without something catastrophic at this scale, right? This incalculable scale. There have been catastrophes in Hurricane Maria and other places at the border, but something of this scale we escaped for 3.5 years. But it doesn't mean the risk was not there the whole time. And look at where we are now. So the other thing we've learned, right, which we absolutely cannot forget, is that when the head of a government sends a signal that they, quote, like the numbers where they are, that they think they're going down, when they peg their own political fortune and what they perceive as an economic fortune to the virus not being that bad, to being on the precipice of going away, right, that has tangible effects for the way that actors within the government behave. The real risk right now that maybe showed up in that good faith error in Georgia, right? We don't know. Was it intentional or not? Is that when you have governors sending the message throughout the government to the people in their bureaucracies that we're open for business, governors who do not want to hear about another outbreak, right? That's contrary to the message. That is dangerous. That is a dangerous message to send to people.